I mean, you got to make the call, right? What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Lombardi Time Brews, where I'm your host, John Delray. Yeah, we're diving into the topic of the last 24, 36 hours, and that is that the Green Bay Packers supposedly had legitimate interest in making a trade with the Indianapolis Colts for Wisconsin alumni running back Jonathan Taylor. Now we know that the Dolphins are also involved, and there's a lot to this in a lot of different ways. And so I'm going to do my best to look at this from every angle we can. Why would the Packers do this? Was there any legitimacy to them doing this? What did Brian Gutekunst have to say in his press conference yesterday? And what are the financial ramifications that could nix this deal? It could be worked around, etc., etc. There's a lot of different angles to attack this from. Before I get to that, though, just some super quick Packer transactions that have occurred since I saw you last, since the initial 53 actually came out. If you recall, I talked about Tree Carpenter, John Ford, talked about them a lot as I was making my final predictions, even at the hour-long show that I did the other day, talking about like should Ford, should Carpenter have made the 53 now that they did. Well, it turns out they were the first two off. Yeah, the Packers made two waiver claims yesterday, claiming two players that were cut across the NFL. And in turn, they had to release two of their own. And in doing so, they cut Tariq Carpenter, inside linebacker, and John Ford, the interior defensive lineman. So, who are the players that they picked up? Well, one would be Zay Anderson, a safety from Buffalo. He previously had spent 2 years on Kansas City's practice squad. And he played some games in Kansas City. He was elevated for certain games and was predominantly a special teamer, played mostly, actually, the roles that Dallin Levitt mostly plays in Green Bay. Keep in mind, too, that these waiver claims, these are not guys that Green Bay can now slide onto their squad or whatever. They claimed them. They're now part of the Packers' active 53. Whether they actually play on game day, whether they're part of the active roster, whether they're part of the healthy inactives that occur every week, we'll find out. But Zay Anderson, uh, slightly redundant, I gotta say, to Dallin Levitt in terms of at least positional placement on special teams. But maybe they saw something else there that they like that Anderson just hasn't displayed fully yet. The other claim of theirs happened to be Ben Sims. Was released by Minnesota, was a UDFA out of Baylor University. The Green Bay Packers had quite a bit of interest in him. Brought him in for a top 30 visit, and I gotta be frank, he did some nice receiving work at Baylor, but it certainly isn't his calling card. What his calling card has been is overall athleticism. I mean, the guy runs, I think it was like a 4.58 40. He's 6'5", 250 pounds, a big dude. But his real calling card happens to be more so like blocking and special teams. He's done quite a bit of special teams work. And so the Packers picked him up once Minnesota released him, and he's now going to be on the Packers 53. And I got to say, I was talking about how if the Packers go get a tight end, it's going to be someone to probably fill the Tyler Davis role. And a little bit more blocker than receiver and special teamer. Enter Ben Sims. So we'll see how this develops. We'll see Sims. Now, when asked about this, the Packers did say that they feel as though Sims displayed some things in the preseason that answered some of the questions they had around him around draft time. So the Packers feel very comfortable adding Sims to 53. Can he become as trusted as Tyler Davis was? Of course, it's going to take some time, but I really do believe that this is your Tyler Davis replacement for all intents and purposes. Then they also finalized two moves that we knew that they were going to do. They signed back Matt Orzik and placed Luke Tenuta on the injured reserve. If you're wondering about Tree Carpenter and John Ford, well, they got released. They got a. I think they still have to go through the waiver process. No word yet about if the Packers are going to bring them back on their own practice squad. As of right now, all 16, 17 spots on the practice squad. The reason why I did this is because Adumagu is technically an add-on to the practice squad. He's an exemption. So the Packers can carry a 17-person practice squad as opposed to the traditional 16. And that's all full right now. Like, full boat. So if the Packers want to bring back Carpenter or Ford, someone is going to have to get released off of this practice squad. The practice squad that was finalized earlier today when they made their final practice squad signing. So here it is, because I haven't seen you since the last time. Since this has been announced, I'm just going to rattle off the names on the Packers practice squad in positional order, if you will. Quarterback, Alex Magoo. Running back, Patrick Taylor. They got Taylor back. Fullback, Henry Pearson. Wide receivers, Grant Dubose. They got him back. And Bo Melton. Yes. Tight end, Austin Allen. They got him back. Center, James Empey. Tackle, Kadeem Telford. Defensive lineman, Chris Slayton. Edge, Keyshawn Banks. As I mentioned earlier, Adumagu still here. Linebacker, Aaron Mosby. Inside linebacker, Christian Welch. He was the signing today. Quick note about Welch, he's not your typical practice squad signing. From 2020 to 2022, he was actually with the Baltimore Ravens in over 3 years. He played, from what I saw from Paul Brettel on Twitter, because I didn't dive into the practice squad player myself, he played 888 special team snaps over 3 years for the Ravens. Rich Bisaccia just might have found a new best friend. So Welch on the practice squad. They also were able to retain on the practice squad Corey Valentine, Keandre Thomas, Innis Gaines, and Benny Sapp. Overall, I am over the moon happy about this practice squad. Many of the players represented here on the squad are some of the toughest cuts that there were to make on the 53. Thrilled that the Packers were able to get them back on the practice squad. Notables that aren't here: Shamar Jean-Charles, he wound up signing with the 49ers practice squad. UDFA inside linebacker Jimmy Phillips Jr., who I actually thought had a really nice camp. It wasn't perfect, no, but it was a nice camp, especially for UDFA inside linebacker. He is not on this list. He may be seeking practice squad employment elsewhere, but overall, very, very good practice squad for the Green Bay Packers. All right, topic of the day, Jonathan Taylor. Let's just take a look here first at Jonathan Taylor. Separate outside the Packers, just on his own. What kind of statistical output has Jonathan Taylor had over the last 2 years? Everyone remembers 2021. The dude was an all-pro. He was a Pro Bowler. The #1 running back in fantasy. That's something you care about. He played in 17 games, had 1,811 yards, averaged 5.5 yards per carry, and had 18 touchdowns. On the receiving end, he had 40 catches for 360 yards. It's a 9-yard per catch average, and 2 touchdowns. And then 2022 happened, and it just wasn't the greatest year for the Indianapolis Colts. Not that 2021 was incredible, but 2022, the wheels really fell off for the Colts in a number of different ways. Their offensive line included, quarterback included, and Jonathan Taylor really wasn't that different. It wasn't as bad as some people are probably making it out to be right now, though. Ultimately, he did suffer an ankle injury, but at the end of the day, he played in 11 games, 861 yards for 4 touchdowns. That's a 4.5 yard per carry average. He also added in 28 catches for 143 yards, only a 5.1 yards per catch, and 0 touchdowns. Ultimately, for 2022, he still was a top 15 running back in yards per carry, as well as yards after contact per carry. That's not bad, right? That's still a quality running back. 4.5 yards per carry behind a completely falling apart offensive line with an ancient quarterback who doesn't move anymore. That's not bad. And yet I see a lot of people talking about how Taylor's 24 years old, and I saw a tweet this morning that said he's washed. He's washed. He's 24. So anyway, can Jonathan Taylor still run the ball? Yeah. Realistically, if he's put into a quality situation with a proven quality offensive line like the Colts used to be before it got so bad last year, Jonathan Taylor could very well find himself in amongst the league's elite again. Speaking of which, Jonathan Taylor wants to be paid like one of the league's elite running back. We know from this offseason that running backs just straight up don't get paid anymore. Christian McCaffrey notwithstanding. Aaron Jones took a pay cut. Austin Eckler, Jonathan Taylor, Saquon Barkley barely took a pay cut over the franchise tag. And then all these guys even had a council of running backs, supposedly, where they got together for a meeting and then talked about how they can strategize monetizing themselves to get more money as a position, since the owners don't want to pay running backs anymore because they are, somewhat replaceable and they do break down quickly, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So Jonathan Taylor is in a spot right now coming off of what is still very respectable, but ultimately compared to 2021, down year. He's hurt. Now, if you ask Taylor, he doesn't really say he's hurt. If he has the Colts, they say he's still hurt. So, that relationship's going great. But Taylor is on the PUP list. That's official now. So he has to miss at minimum the first 4 games of this season, which suddenly means even if the Packers trade for him, at most, Jonathan Taylor can play for 13 games for wherever he's going to. And then, of course, the playoffs as well, if said acquiring team were to make the playoffs. So, all things to bear in mind here when assessing Jonathan Taylor. He's 24 years old. Yes, he has proven to be one of the NFL's best running backs. Yes, he wants to be paid like one of the NFL's best running backs. He's in the final year of his contract, and dude's got to miss the first month of the season at a minimum, coming back from an ankle injury, depending on who you ask. So, that's the player. Okay. Look at the financial side of things, because of course that's important. That's a big part of the deal here with Jonathan Taylor. The Packers right now, depending on your sourcing, whether you're looking at Ken Ingalls on Twitter, SportTrack, they have somewhere between $6 to $9 million in available cap right now. And here's what we can say with certainty about the Packers cap situation as it stands right now. The Packers don't want to do two things. One, they don't want to spend a bunch of money right now, because every team in the NFL likes to have $5 to $10 million in season that they can play with. You know, like if a move comes up at the deadline, you got to have some money available, or just a free agent signings, be them from the street, or some great player in the middle of the year who comes available because you've got injuries or whatever. The players or the Packers like to have $5 to $10 million just sitting so that they can use it if need be. So they don't really want to spend a lot of that money that they have left right now. In addition, the Packers are in the last year of having dead cap money from Aaron Rodgers, and moving forward, they don't want to take on a crap ton more. They actually want to have the financial withstanding over the next few years to go out and get other players. The last couple of years, the Packers haven't signed many free agents, partly because they just haven't been able to afford them, because they've constantly been restructuring, pushing money forward. Well, this year, and to an extent next year, are the years that are plagued with all of this dead money, all this pushed forward type stuff. Or even if the Packers release some of the players that are accounting for this dead money, they can't get out from the initial charge. Aaron Rodgers is a perfect example. Yes, they moved on from Aaron Rodgers, but they had already paid him $40 million that got pushed, right? So he's still got $40 million of dead cap on the books right now. So understand that the Packers don't want to add a bunch more, right? We can say that with certainty about the Packers' financial situation. So whatever trade they work out, be it for Jonathan Taylor, for somebody else, whatever, the Packers aren't looking to spend a bunch. They're not looking to add on to their debt cap totals. So whatever they do is going to have to be relatively clean financially. Pure swaps, if you will. So let's take a look. Jonathan Taylor, entering the last year of his deal, is due for $4.3 million this year. As far as I can tell, and I am not a cap guru, but I do dive into the research here, and as far as what I was able to tell, an acquiring team would have to be on the hook for $4.3 million of cap space for Jonathan Taylor this year. Okay, now, over on the Packers side of things, where do they have $4.3 million that they can cleanly move on from with no dead cap? Or, that you're acquiring a running back. What does it cost to trade the Colts, or what does it save to move on from one of the Packers running backs? Let's take a look. First of all, trading A.J. Dillon, if that's the flavor of the week. Let's move on from Dillon. That would open about $1.3 million in cap space right now. So, of course, if you do like Taylor for Dillon clean swap, that's still going to cost the Packers $3 million, right? And the Colts are never going to do that anyway. So I'm just doing the math, all right? Trading Aaron Jones. I know you don't want to, but trading Aaron Jones would save the Packers about $2.4 million right now. Again, not quite Taylor's total, but $2.4 million right now. And it would make the Packers incur a $12.3 million dead cap total for 2024. I don't think they want to. Okay. How about, though, a perfectly clean number, 4.3 for 4.3? Who on the Packers makes $4.3 million? Who on the Packers has a pure salary of $4.3 million, and if he's moved on from, wouldn't cost a dime in dead money? Josh Nijman does. In fact, his tender is for $4.3 million. And because it's a one-year tender, there's nothing to worry about cap penalties moving on. Keep in mind, too, for the purposes of constructing a trade, that the Green Bay Packers have a bunch of extra draft capital because of the Aaron Rodgers trade, because that better be a first-round pick. And then you can expect Realistically, maybe a couple comp picks coming their way too because of some of the free agent exoduses as of late, as some of the players have head off to Green Bay East, etc. Next couple of years could be rather draft pick heavy for Green Bay. So keep that in mind. Now, several other considerations before that. That's just the financials. So let's take a look at the considerations. When Brian Gutekunst was asked yesterday about the Jonathan Taylor trade or the rumors around Jonathan Taylor, what did Brian Gutekunst say? Well, he got a very wry smile and he said, basically, which cliche do you want me to pull out? We're in every conversation. I can't talk about players and other teams. We like what we have, etc., etc. He knew exactly what he was doing. It also was one of the first times that I recall him actually answering it in such a wry way. Normally, when Gutekunst is pressed about trade rumors, it's, he actually uses one of the cliches in earnest. Yesterday, he knew exactly what he was doing, and it did feel a little different. When asked specifically about A.J. Dillon, he said that A.J. Dillon is a part of the team, regardless of whether a trade would have occurred or not. Okay, so A.J. Dillon's on the team. When asked about Aaron Jones, he said that Aaron Jones is the heart and soul of the Green Bay Packers. Okay, so you're probably not moving on from Jones. Wait a minute, we're going to get to that in a second. And then what's Yash status? Now, he wasn't asked directly about Yash, and I wouldn't expect him to be. And by no means am I expecting that the Colts would take a Yash for JT trade. Like, don't turn this off. Don't think I'm that dumb. Okay, but Yash, we know, on the depth chart has fallen behind Rasheed Walker and is now realistically the second swing tackle. Given the Packers' fluid situation with David Bakhtiari, Zach Tom being the top backup for inside, the Green Bay Packers having two swing tackles is not the worst thing in the world. Don't get me wrong. I'm not advocating to trade Yash. I'm simply finding financial matches that would make sense, especially considering the Colts' offensive line ain't what it used to be. So, further considerations from that. Okay, Taylor being out 4 games. Like I said, the Colts offensive line, how's that doing? Well, it used to be real good, like really good. They had Quentin Nelson at left guard. They had these name recognition tackles. They were really good 2 years ago. One of the best offensive lines in football. That's what the Colts had garnered this whole reputation around, was that they're an offensive line team. And then last year, like I said, the wheels just fell off. Quentin Nelson, who had given up 4 sacks over the first 4 years in the league, suddenly gave up 5 last year alone. And then others on the offensive line, it was in shambles last year. And now they've got a rookie quarterback who is going to be one of the most mobile quarterbacks in the NFL, but you still don't want to make him run for his life, right? Now, PFF still considers that the Colts could be a top 10 offensive line this year. And they very well could if they return to their 2021 form. But if they don't, the Colts have severe needs on the offensive line. And realistically, even if they begin to get back to that 2021 form, they still have some needs of depth on their offensive line. And from what I was reading, at least from some Colts writers' opinions, they could use that more so at the tackle spot than the interior spots. So, the other thing that I'm just going to throw in here is the rumors that are out there right now. You can take this for a grain of salt, right? Take it for whatever you will. Maybe you take it as fact-based, maybe you take it as complete hogwash, whatever. It's out there, okay? It's been reported now by a few different people from Sports Illustrated, all the Miami side of things, right? Supposedly, with Miami engaged in trade talks for Jonathan Taylor, the Colts said, all right, let's talk. We want Jalen Waddle and a second-round pick. And the Dolphins went, no, right? So, like, the Colts were apparently asking for a premium player at a premium position with premium draft capital. And then even the Dolphins are going to get a running back for 13 games that they still got to extend. It kind of gives the appearance as though the Colts are allowing Jonathan Taylor to seek out this trade, but they're not actually going to trade him unless they get the sun and the moon, right? So something to keep in mind. I know that there was another rumor floating out there too. I don't believe this one at all, but apparently, like, the Colts, when the Colts and Packers engaged in a talk, the Colts said, like, we want Christian Watson at a first. Okay. And, maybe, and I really realistically should have said this at the top, maybe the Packers and Colts just had the conversation of, a scout just called up the Colts and said, hey, but you got Jonathan Taylor. We don't have any running backs really past 2023. Like, Aaron Jones's cap number explodes up to $17 million next year. A.J. Dillon's a free agent after this year. If we were to get Taylor and get him to an extension, our position may be solved of the really, really good player who's only 24. What do you guys want for him? And then the cold scout, maybe not GM, maybe just a bottom tier scout said, well, I know my GM's looking for about this. And the Packers went, okay, bye. Maybe it never advanced far. We have no idea, nor are we realistically ever going to know. But I will say, before I kind of look at this from exclusively the Packers side, I will say that this one seemed, because the Packers, yes, Brian, in every conversation, Gutekunst. We hear about this all the time, right? That a marquee player was traded or signed somewhere, and the Packers were in it, and then didn't do the thing because of money, because of something, whatever. But the Packers never do the thing. We've grown used to that. But Field Yates for ESPN said that there was legitimate interest coming from the Packers. Some of the Colts writers said that this was more than just a talk. Now, a few Green Bay people, according to their sources, said that it was just a Green Bay scout making a phone call. So where's the truth? Realistically, probably somewhere in the middle. I think it was quite possibly in earnest that the Green Bay Packers wanted Jonathan Taylor. And given Brian Gutekunst's comments yesterday of Jones being the heart and soul of the team and A.J. Dillon being a part of the team regardless, was Brian Gutekunst seriously going to try to have a backfield of Jonathan Taylor, A.J. Dillon, and Aaron Jones? And just go all in on running the ball? Or go all in on positional versatility, right? If you're a defensive coordinator and you see in week 10 of this season, coming out into the huddle, you see Jordan Love with the offensive line, and then Christian Watson, and then A.J. Dillon, Jonathan Taylor, and Aaron Jones. What exactly defensive formation do you get on the field? We know the Packers love their chess pieces, so it sounds insane, right? It sounds like pure lunacy to have just the three running backs, or to have all three and not ship the Colts back a running back. But it's also the kind of thing that Green Bay kind of loves to do. When Brian Gutekunst was asked about the running back position yesterday, he said that the Packers still value it as a premium position. That he understands the market, but Green Bay still values their running backs. Enough to have three? I don't know. So like I said, is this probably going to happen? No, probably not. Is it even likely to happen? No, probably not. But the Packers' future at the running back position is very questionable. Aaron Jones, even though he hasn't been used all that much, the Packers have been so good about protecting his health. We have to acknowledge that his cap number goes through the roof next year. Maybe he'll take another pay cut, maybe another restructure, maybe it's an extension. But he's still not getting any younger. And A.J. Dillon, to this point, while being graded favorably by PFF several times, ultimately, I think there is something left to be desired in his game. I remember being asked at the draft, like, who's one Packer who's got to step up this year? And I said it was A.J. Dillon. Because he's not running like you would expect a man with that musculature stature to run. He runs like a normal dude, not like a bulldozer. So could they use Jonathan Taylor? Yeah, they could. Is it slightly redundant? Yeah. Might as well go all in on your strengths, though, right? So the future of the position is in question. There's a really good player to be had. And financially, you could afford it. So here's where I'm at, okay? What if the Green Bay Packers were to call up the Colts and say, here's an offer, okay? We got several tackles that we're happy with. We're willing to give up Yash. That'll make the financials work easy peasy. Take Yash, take A.J. Dillon, and take a third-round pick for your 24-year-old running back who I'm going to get 13 games out of. Who says no? Maybe the Packers do. Maybe they don't want to include Dillon. In which case, maybe then you're willing to do Yash in a second, maybe. I don't know. So, is it going to happen? No, probably not. Is it worth thinking about? Probably, at least to some degree. I at least understand the logic of why the Packers would entertain the thought process. One thing that I didn't say earlier that is important to note is maybe because Jonathan Taylor and his people received permission from the Colts to seek out a trade, maybe it was Taylor who called up the Packers and said, hey, I'd love to play for you people. I want to come home. Come get me. And then the Packers did the courteous thing and gave a call and then said, no. Maybe. And I know so much of this just seems so outlandish. But I don't think that this came from nowhere. I don't think that this is one of those that was purely and exclusively some clickbait bullcrap. I don't think that this was just some dude on Bleacher Report who was asked to come up with hypothetical trades and then it blew up. Been there. No. There probably was a little bit of legitimacy here. And that means it's something that we should give some thought. Thanks so much for joining me on Lombardi Time Brews. I'll be back tomorrow doing what I actually planned on doing this week, where I'm going to go over what I view to be, now that the 53 is set, what are the 5 concerns that I have about the Packers roster right now. So please join me for that tomorrow. And if I don't see you tomorrow, have an absolutely wonderful weekend. We're getting closer and closer and closer and closer to actual Packers regular season football. Thanks so much for joining me. Have a good night tonight. And as always, go Pack Go.